Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, September 15th, 2025. Time to get going with another week and another show. What are we? Mid-month now. Midway through the month of September, which means we're midway through the last month before the end of the fiscal year, which means I guess we are staring down the barrel of the next government shutdown. We've been talking about it for quite a while, counting down the days. But we count down the days towards a lot of things. And I did a check and correction. So I think somewhere along the line, the manual countdown of the days until the next, until the midterm elections, until the technical, I guess, end of Donald Trump's term, et cetera, et cetera. So I double check the numbers every once in a while and have to realign things and get them back on track. But it's not hard to figure out that we have just over 2 weeks left in this month and therefore this fiscal year, and therefore, well, I don't think a lot of the appropriations bills have been passed. And it's a controversial subject among congressional Democrats, rank and file Democrats voting at home, and some controversy, some differences of opinion as to whether or not it makes sense to find any cooperation or common ground with Republicans in order to fund the government going forward. Of course, I think the easier to understand and easier to grasp reaction is, well, don't cooperate with the Republicans doing anything. They're running the government into the ground. Don't help them fund it. But then some excellent points along the way, like keeping the government funded means that at least the judiciary stays open and operating. And it's been as easy as it's been to date for the Trump forces to pretend that they're ignoring the courts. It's been the only backstop against them running rampant entirely. Now they've done an awful lot of to defuse the ability of the courts to actually rein in the administration. So there's that. I mean, the Supreme Court just simply undoes things at the highest level, but not always, I guess, is the only thing you can point at. But the rest of the institutions have more or less collapsed. So I don't know. Good point made there. We'll have to see how elected Democrats decide to approach us and what sort of explanations they can offer us for keeping things open. And yeah, as much fun as it would be to be able to say, well, I'm going to defund the levers of power that Trump is using, however ineffectively, to implement his agenda. It's the blowback of a government shutdown doesn't always fall the way you think. Definitely something to keep in mind, and but there's going to be it's going to be an interesting time. There's going to be a lot of reaction from rank and file Democrats upset with the idea that Democrats would come to the table for anything. So we'll see how this settles itself. It's been a bit of a wild weekend. Trump was mostly quiet. They sent him off golfing in New Jersey. Basically, they sent him up to New York, I think, for the 9/11 memorial, and he never came back, and then decided to stay up there and go on Fox and Friends, as we told you about on Friday. He had a long a regular, normal Donald Trump interview with the Fox and Friends people, saying, things that would essentially relegate you to campaigning in New Hampshire with a boot on your head normally, but for whatever reason have instead been painted orange and sent out, and we're told that that's the President of the United States. So one of those. Then he spent the weekend golfing at his New Jersey, one of two, I think, New Jersey, but the famous one, the one he likes to spend time at, the one where he buried Ivana in Bedminster, and mostly had nothing to say. I think because the weekend he thought was more or less going his way. Everybody was falling all over themselves, not only to find something nice somehow to say about Charlie Kirk, but also policing everybody else's tone. So it was a night or a weekend of long knives for journalists and professors and others of that ilk around the country. Firings left and right. This morning, famously, one announced at the Washington Post that we can check in on, but professors everywhere treading lightly as they really kicked the machine into high gear here, pretending that Charlie Kirk was some sort of symbol of civility, which is insane. However, I did see some very interesting writing over the weekend that I think we need to catch you up with. I know Greg is prepared to help catch us up with a lot of that stuff in terms of trying your best, and it's intentionally confusing, but trying our best to try and understand what we're learning about the motivation that might have been behind the shooting. And there's no way, I mean, the whole design of the thing, if there is a design, is to make sure that people don't understand it. And if they do understand it, tell them they don't, and then laugh at them when they believe you when you say you don't understand it. So it's a very complicated situation, but it's going to pull in a lot of other personalities, which I think we've done a fairly good job of introducing into the roster over the years. They're not central figures to our narrative here on KITM, but they're names you have heard before, and you'll have the appropriate reaction to hearing their names again, which is how we regarded Charlie Kirk. But also a lot of interesting writing that helped me understand how it could possibly be that there are people out there saying, yeah, Charlie Kirk, fantastic fellow. So sad that the world was deprived of this great man. But then there's also a lot of myth building going on in all of this. So, all right, well, Greg Dworkin has been collecting all of this. And, well, let's see. How shall we introduce him today? I think if we're going to be there's two ways to go, and I'm thinking about the piano on this one. There's the Charlie Kirk music, which ought to be being played like this. But on the other hand, there's also the entire right-wing response, a coordinated response to try to gaslight America into believing something entirely different about Charlie Kirk. So we'll find out which old-time villain he really is as we bring Greg in. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
Good morning. And right after I told you I had no video, of course I have a video.
Okay. That's good. That's fine. I love a surprise.
It's right at the bottom.
Surprise.
And I don't know that you can play TikTok directly. I don't know if you have to sign on and
that is a huge mystery.
Subscribe and all that stuff. So I gave you the Twitter version because it's easier.
Okay. But you're evil for giving me a Twitter version.
Well, that's okay because it's a good person on evil Twitter. So
okay.
and that is often the case.
All right. I might be able. Well, I'll use the Twitter version for. No, I won't. I mean, I hate that, and I am boycotting it for the show. TikTok is a bit of a mystery for me on my phone. It tends to allow me to play it once, and then when I say, hey, this is a good video, come look at this, it freezes up and tells me I have to download things. So
right, it's all sorts of rules. So I don't know that it's suitable for a surprise play, but the Twitter is. But while you set that up, I'm actually going to start with something a little different.
I'm working on it. Yes.
Now for something completely different. This is something that we have been waiting for.
Oh, yeah. How long have I been waiting for it?
I don't know. Ever since Mamdani won the primary, I think.
Oh, okay. Yes. Go ahead then. We're ready.
Kathy Hochul, the Democratic governor of New York.
Add some quick gloss on
Hold on a second. Something TikTok happened, and now it's not.
TikTok is taking over the world.
Yeah. All right. And I'm like, well, what are these two lines here that normally pause a video because I'm clicking wildly on them and they're not doing it? So they're just letting us know that it's 11 right now.
Oh, good.
I guess.
Yeah, it's
I'm
parallel.
not certain what that's supposed to mean, other than pause. But okay.
It's a abstract depiction of the World Trade Center before.
Yeah. This is 9/11. Insane. Okay. No, it's not having it. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's why we're doing Twitter. So in the New York Times,
Twitter.
Kathy Hochul put a piece, why I am endorsing Zoran Mamdani. And if it was too long and you didn't read it, basically what she says is the pressure got to me.
Well, all right. That's fair. It's supposed to, at some level, it's supposed to
Right.
work
So
like
Schumer and Jeffries are next. But
Good,
what she
finally.
concludes with, Zoran and I don't see eye to eye on everything, and I don't expect us to. I'll always reserve the right to disagree honestly and argue passionately, but I also believe New York State, New York City are at their best when we stand together. For all these reasons, I'm endorsing Zoran Mamdani in the upcoming election for mayor. If you'll note the last paragraph I read, it said absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I look forward to working with him to ensure New York City's best days lie ahead. I like it. I don't care. The point is you endorse. Get out of the way. If you don't know how to attract voters, then let somebody who does do the work. That's all. It's really simple.
Yeah, this is good. There's now a movement towards finding those endorsements, and it's interesting to watch people who are late endorsers but early endorsers from mainstream, I guess, and higher up levels of elected Democratic politics now endorsing and then letting everybody know why is everybody else taking so long to endorse him? I only took 6 weeks. You should have done it. But that's part of the pressure game too.
Well,
and it's working, and I like it, and it's fine.
Whether it's Spencer Cox or whether it's Kathy Hochul, somebody on Blue Sky said something that resonated with me, which I thought was simple but really profound.
Yes.
And that is that politicians are like puppies.
Oh.
You have to slap them on the nose when they do something bad. You have to praise them when they do something good.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And that's part of the reason why it always drives me nuts when people say, yes, she endorsed him, but not the right way. Yes, she endorsed him, but it took too long. She endorsed him.
Mm-hmm. And
thank you, Kathy Hochul. End of discussion.
September 15th. That's not that ain't awful. Well, okay.
Right. Well, same thing with Jeffries and Schumer. You hate them for other reasons, fine. Go ahead and say so. If and when they come around,
yeah,
then that's good. Oh, in a parallel news, little news factoid for that race, the New York City mayoral race.
That one.
There's a fella named Jim Walden. We don't talk about much. He's a lawyer and independent. He was polling at like 1% or something like that.
In Staten Island.
And he pulled out.
Oh.
However.
Well, now Slee was going to get 4 votes.
He won't.
Oh.
Because,
why?
And here's the relevant point, his name is still on the ballot.
Right. You did tell us that. You warned us that was going to be the case.
So he went to court and said, I want my name removed from the ballot. And the court said, too late. Don't you listen to Kagro in the morning?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? You missed the deadline. You want your name. All right, it's removed. But I see it. It's right there. That would have been something. The court should have done it that way. I don't see it. You see it? No, sir. All right. What a waste of time.
Yeah, for mainstream readers, of which there are 3 left, this is from the Associated Press. What past election results can tell us about the New York City mayoral race? And basically, it's a rehash of stuff you already know because you listen to Kagro in the morning. But if this is your first show ever,
hello,
then what it says is to understand the coalition the candidates have built, the Associated Press examined precinct-level results in the last 2 Democratic mayoral primaries.
Mm-hmm.
Adams skipped the Democratic primary this year. Cuomo finished almost 13 percentage points behind Mamdani. In other words, Mamdani cleaned his clock.
Yeah. Okay.
So in the analysis they do, and this paragraph made me chuckle after just telling you that, should Cuomo and Adams remain in the race, the AP analysis suggests Mamdani could have a clearer path to victory, assuming recent voting patterns repeat themselves. Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, who remains a long shot, could also draw votes away from Cuomo and Adams, the more moderate candidates compared to Sliwa, further helping Mamdani. So, in other words, Mamdani appears to have won because he apparently got more votes than the other people.
Well, that's one way of finding out.
Shock you, but we had professional analysts look at this, and that's the conclusion we came to. But Mamdani's coalition is distinct from the others. Mamdani gets more voters to turn out, and he gets a higher percentage of voters that do turn out. Those are separate things.
Yes.
You mentioned Staten Island. You can get all of Staten Island voters. So therefore, you get a high percentage of the voters that turn out. But even if all of Staten Island voters turn out, which is a separate category, it's only 6% of the electorate.
Yeah.
So you can do very well in getting a high turnout. And separately, you can even do well in getting those that turned out voted for me in high numbers. And if they're not in the right areas, it doesn't really help you all that much.
Yeah.
Unless you're running for, some Staten Island position, like congressman.
Or the Electoral College is involved, which it isn't
not
here.
in statewide elections,
right?
And not in citywide elections, like New York City mayor. But they not only find that more people turn out for Mamdani, and a higher percentage of those who do turn out for Mamdani compared to the others. In other words, he got more votes. I already told you that. There's a lot of enthusiasm for.
Hey, that's like at least 6 buttons away, though.
I know, but I'm just telling you.
Enthusiasm.
That's the one. Okay.
The increase in votes cast wasn't uniform. The city overall saw 6% more votes cast in 2025 compared to the last mayoral election, but in the neighborhoods Mamdani won, the average increase was 14%.
All right.
Also, a lot of stuff about the Upper East Side and Cuomo getting the people who make a lot of money. Mamdani's strong performance in wealthier neighborhoods overshadowed the fact that his coalition was largely made up of middle-income voters. In general, Cuomo won more votes than Mamdani among lowest-income voters, and Mamdani started overtaking Cuomo with voters who lived in census tracts with median annual household incomes of $60,000 to $70,000 a year. That may sound like a lot to you if you're from Utah, but if you're from New York City, that'll get you a daily cup of coffee for about 3.5 weeks. So voters in these areas wouldn't be considered low income by national standards, but in New York City, that income makes a family of 4 eligible for Section 8 housing vouchers.
Well, there you have it. High cost of living in New York City.
Cuomo significantly outran Adams with wealthy voters, higher income voters, but he didn't beat Mamdani among those voters. Of the 15 neighborhoods with median household incomes of over $150,000 a year, Mamdani won 8, Cuomo won 7, including Tribeca and the Upper East Side, the 2 wealthiest, but only by a small amount.
Okay.
All right. So if Adams gets squeezed out by Mamdani and Cuomo's appeal to higher income votes, what about lower income voters?
Yeah, what about
Mamdani can compete with Adams and Cuomo among this group, according to the analysis. And you notice in all of this, they barely, if at all, mention Curtis Sliwa, the Republican. And it's funny because I keep seeing these, I have to do something to make Curtis Sliwa happen. Got to make fetch happen. So I'm going to write all these articles.
It's getting late, Curtis.
Curtis Sliwa, the unrecognized dark horse. No. He's been around for 40 years. Everybody in New York knows him, even if you don't, because you're only 27 years old, reporter. Everybody in New York knows Sliwa the way they knew Trump, and they don't like him. So no, he's no dark horse. He'll do well in Staten Island and nowhere else.
Okay.
So that's the background. And so Mamdani is going to be the next mayor. And it's just a question of, how you figure it out and how you do it. It's all of a piece.
Okay.
So let's move on to the big story of the day, I think, which, of course, is the Charlie Kirk aftermath. I got a video I want to play because it's really instructive.
Okay.
And although it's like 8 minutes long, you don't have to watch the whole thing. But do the first minute or so, and then you decide if it's interesting enough for you to keep listening.
Now, what's been most interesting is that I have opened it on Twitter and on TikTok. And my assumption was the TikTok would be the much less cooperative, and it's actually the more cooperative. So,
well, play it for me.
I mean, it was once, but again, sometimes the second go round on TikTok is disaster. But let's give it a try on its natural habitat on TikTok. This is
Sibel Cantarell.
Okay.
An explainer.
And add some quick gloss on recent events that might help folks who aren't plugged into the far corners of the internet make better sense of the motivations and actions of 2 major right-wing groups that are involved in the recent events. If you're looking at a
I'm sorry.
Without pointing fingers.
Okay.
I'm just explaining to you who these groups are.
Sure. Point. I'm doing it.
swirl of cryptic memes and trying to reverse engineer a motive, you're going to misread this story. What looks like politics is often subculture. What looks like a manifesto is sometimes a dare wrapped in a joke, wrapped in a void.
I see, yes.
Two
Understood.
families on the right keep getting mashed together in coverage. There's the mainline far-right Christian nationalism, and then the Groyper scene, especially its black-pilled accelerationist. They overlap in rhetoric and enemies, but they don't want the same future, and they don't use the internet in the same way. Groypers refers to a youth-driven online far-right scene that's associated with the America First brand, which is led by Nick Fuentes.
We know him.
Black pill comes from incel forums and signals fatalism. So no improvement in humanity is possible, and thereby despair is rational. Acceleration in extremist context means stoking crises to hasten societal collapse. You can think of this as builders versus burners. And so for Christian nationalism in its hard right form, it's still builder energy. It insists that the nation is or should be explicitly Christian, prizes hierarchy, order, and a return to rightful social roles. But the strategy is institutional. They want to win elections. They want to pass laws. They want to staff the courts and capture the school boards and rechristen the public square.
Normal sounding.
And you hear vocabulary about restoration and revival and sovereignty and virtue. And this imagined endpoint is a moral order enforced by the state.
I will pause it at this point and say, I think that's an excellent explanation of what the Christian nationalist right is about, and I guess is the reason why, if you think of Charlie Kirk in that context, you might say something as foolish as Ezra Klein did, that he was practicing politics the right way. He was simply engaging in debate about his desired ends through normal politics. That's not actually what he spent the vast majority of his time on lately, but there was a world in which you could, and it's by the way, it's an artificial world that's created for you by social media algorithms, but there was a world, we'll get to this later, in which you could come to believe that about Charlie Kirk. But
a very important sub thread there.
Yeah.
Spencer Cox and his vision of what Utah is, was, and should be.
Okay.
And we're going to get to that from a really, really interesting interview of Spencer Cox by McKay Coppin.
Okay. Governor of
Mormon,
Utah.
McKay Coppin, of course, the Atlantic author and reporter. And McKay Coppin grew up in the town that Charlie Kirk was shot. So knows it really, really, really
interesting.
well.
Okay. All right.
His reaction, by
too?
the way, to Kirk getting shot was very similar to my reaction in Newtown when 12/14 happened, because and Spencer Cox to a certain extent as well, partly because you had this vision you created in your head, about the perfect small town. Lovely environment, innocent, that you lived in, which gets shattered in a moment by a gunshot.
Yeah.
And you react accordingly. And don't forget, Cox may be a politician and his job is to be calm, cool, and collected. But everybody who's been in that situation is in a complete brain fog for like 2 or 3 weeks because of the shock and PTSD. And Cox is no different.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that he says right now, I'm willing to overlook. I'm just saying. Been there, done that. I understand.
I can see that, there was definitely some bizarre on the scene reaction from a lot of different people, and I guess everybody has their own style of going into shock too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And what you rely on. But let's go back to the video, because I think it is important. And this whole constructed idea in your head of what things are and should be, is part and parcel of the whole Christian nationalist movement, of which Charlie Kirk was the happy, smiley face as he tried to get black women professors fired or other things that aren't so nice.
Yes. All right. We're continuing on.
And even when their rhetoric gets apocalyptic, the plan is still state power. The Groyper world orbits a completely different sun. It's youth-heavy, it's a coalition that includes a lot of streamers and online personalities, and it borrows from incel forums, gamer chat, crypto cynicism, edgelord comedy, and a lot of terminally online irony. Here's the core distinction. The black-pilled wing does not believe in reform, not of institutions, not of culture, and not of people. The black pill is the conviction that decline is irreversible. If nothing can be redeemed, then the only creative act is negation. And that's where accelerationism comes in. In this context, acceleration means pressing on every social fault line, race, gender, religion, class, until something breaks. It is not policy, it's physics. The expectation is collapse, followed by nothing. Unlike some white supremacist or apocalyptic Christian variants that at least fantasize about what comes after, mainstream black pill content rarely sketches a constructive post-collapse order. It's entropy worship. Speed the unraveling and enjoy the spectacle. A quick detour.
Everything is
so
fine, said the dog
as
as he had a cup of coffee.
Yeah. This is extremely dark, but extremely correct.
Black-pilled accelerationism is not the same thing as tech bro AI accelerationism. The latter
that's an
is
interesting
a
point.
futurist.
So we'll use that as their accelerationism, not the same as AI tech bro accelerationism.
Right. So stopping the tape for a moment as you did. Stopping the tape for a moment as you did.
Yes.
Think about what we do know and don't know about the purported shooter.
Yes.
And where does he fit?
Yeah.
The answer is groypers.
Yeah, it certainly seems so. And by the way,
and so many shooters, in fact, the answer is groypers.
Yes, that's been the case a lot. And I think, at a minimum, the thing that people who may or may not have been paying close attention to this, we've mentioned the groypers tried to sort of keep people up to speed on the fact that they exist and what they're about. We haven't gone totally in depth, but the thing that people who are paying peripheral attention might recognize is the scrolling of messages on the bullet casings and on the guns.
With the LOL added something.
Yeah. And it seems like it's intentionally designed to confound, and the more they see people in the news try and analyze it, the more dark laughter is happening on their forums. They love that.
It's mean-driven entropy.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are doing our best to unravel all of this. This is pretty wild. And there's more to this video, but do we want to just roll it again, or do we need to do some explanatory? I forget where we just had a chat. What did we tell our folks who are listening at home?
Well, why don't you play a little bit more of the video, and then we'll decide to.
Okay, and Scott's
it's 8 minutes long, so I'm not sure we'll play the whole thing. But on the other hand, it's really good.
It really is. There were some excellent explainers out there, and what we really learned was that mainstream newspaper style coverage of something that's designed to taunt and confound, we're just not prepared for it.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of comments about, listen, if you don't have somebody under 30 working on your payroll in a newsroom who can explain to the old boomers what the heck is going on here, don't even comment online. You just look stupid.
It's kind of true.
Oh, it's Antifa. Must be leftist.
Yeah.
You haven't a clue.
Right. And I mean, I saw.
You never played Helldivers 2?
I never have.
You never played Far Cry 6? You wouldn't know about Belliciao. It's got nothing to do with Italian anti-fascist stuff.
That was
background
fascinating.
music for these video games.
I thought there was a clue, an entryway there, but it was totally missed by investigators. I don't know, exactly what drove it, but you don't even have to be a young person or a gamer necessarily to have recognized this one. The first couple hours following the discovery of the murder weapon and the shell casings, and the news conference, impromptu news conference, and they give the description of, well, there was one with a series of arrows, like a totally unhelpful description of what's on these things. But as soon as someone gave a better description, well, what arrows? What do they do? What do you mean a series of arrows? And they said, well, one is pointing up, and then one's pointing to the right, and then there are 3 in a row that are pointing down. I don't know. I don't play anything, but I knew right away. Oh yeah, that's okay. That's a video game. They're deploying some kind of attack.
You can get that from your keyboard, right? So just don't even
just
comment on
that.
it if you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, but I am commenting on the fact that, you can you'll go around in circles forever if you're trying to make sense out of just being handed the fact that it's a series of arrows. Or as I was thinking over the week, It would be like to give you an example, if you don't grasp that, but you are online enough to listen to a podcast. It would be like saying, well, the person had a weird message, and then at the end there was just weird, like, I think they dropped something on their keyboard. There was a series of nonsensical punctuation marks. You mean right here where there's a semicolon, a dash, and then a closed parentheses? That's not butt dialing. That's an old school emoticon before they had the emoji. It's a winking smiley face. You don't know that? Oh,
I can imagine, a 60-year-old spokesperson for the local police department saying, we're trying to figure out what's going on here, and we have more investigation to do, but there appears to be a group of people who fax each other funny cartoons, and we're looking into it, because it might be out of that culture. Okay, fine. Thank you. That was extremely helpful. Have, some nice tea.
Right.
Go over there, sit in a rocking chair, relax, would you? And, hire some younger people.
Okay.
So
you're going to roll more.
We're going to play some of this video maybe.
All right. Yeah, play a little more. We're about 3 minutes and 15 seconds into it here. I'm going to back it up to about 3 minutes.
Here. Black-pilled accelerationism is not the same thing as tech bro AI accelerationism. The latter is a futurist, albeit doomy faith about speeding technological progress even at humanity's expense. Black pill is a social political fatalism that invites breakdown. Different crowds, different goals. It's also distinct from the more formal Christian nationalist project. The language sometimes rhymes, both talk about decay, but Christian nationalists think institutions can be repurposed. Black-pilled groupers think the institutions are rot. So you
could stop it there.
All right.
The rest is just more on the same thing. But I think it's a really important distinction she makes between the builders and the burners.
Yes.
And the next piece I have in that line is Max Burns. It's a dark piece, so these are dark times, I think is appropriate. And he writes, a Gen Z colleague described the black pill mindset, now you know what it is, to me in a way I'd never heard before. For younger kids, especially men, there's a pressure to either get rich at any cost or get famous at any cost. Mm-hmm. They use irony and crude memes to mask the deep anxiety they feel, and what stood out to this person was the LOL nothing matters attitude Kirk's assassin tried so hard to project in his bullet inscriptions. Yeah. Political but mostly stupid meme Hollywood costumes, like, dressing as a skeleton groiper, and the gamer culture he was steeped in. His politics almost feel secondary. We're seeing an uptick in ironic phrases written on bullet casings that are peppered with very online references that's capitalized, meant to be read and understood not by the media, and they don't, but by these shooters' online peers. They want to be remembered as the people who went for it. And it speaks to an alienation that younger Americans, disproportionately men, try to heal not through therapy, but through online game communities, Discord, validating themselves online. Their goal isn't news coverage, it's to be cheered on by their peers. So it doesn't matter if you mention my name because it's on the news and that's what I wanted to hear. That's not what you wanted to hear. You wanted to hear your fellow forum members cheer you on.
Or at least
you could care less
minimum,
about the general
say,
public,
I heard your name.
which speaks to the whole idea of we don't talk about his name because he wanted to be famous and we're not giving him that. That's actually not what they wanted.
No, but yeah, it runs in parallel. I mean, you can
I'll still do it. Don't get me wrong,
yeah.
but that's not what they wanted. Let's just understand.
Right. That. I thought that was interesting, and there was also another sort of I don't know. I guess I would say parallel analysis to this one, which viewed it more from the perspective of there's definitely a mass shooter fandom community, at the very worst heart, at the very darkest heart of all of this, for people who then actually come to aspire to doing one of these themselves, and their goal there is to have their name invoked not on the news directly, but rather by the next set of shooters. You want to be remembered among this fandom as such a famous and notorious shooter that next shooter will scrawl your name on their weapon as an obscure reference.
So Max Burns writes, at the same time they're stewing in a social media ecosystem where algorithms feed them in a constant stream of rage bait, so they form parasocial hatreds. The shooter's family said he'd only become political recently and seemed to fixate on Charlie Kirk's viral content. What Cox said is broadly right. That's Governor Cox of Utah. Social media is a cancer. And when coupled with the social alienation epidemic we're seeing in America, it's convincing people reality is something less than real. So if you're never going to get rich, or get all the girls, if you're a young man and that's your goal, why not try to be infamous? The traditional venue for that was school shootings, but those have become so commonplace, shooters barely register. So we're numb to it. And what gets headlines now? Political shootings.
Oh, yeah.
Think about the guy who shot Trump Butler. Pennsylvania. Even better if your message is confusing to the normies. So it isn't just the violence on the instant or the instant celebrity. It's using purposefully conflicting, nonsensical messaging like meme slogans on bullets to confuse the media and create confusion and chaos. It's trolling with bullets, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't know Kirk Shooter's ideology. I imagine we'll learn more. My point is the pattern of his behavior.
Okay.
His very online existence, his deep kinship with irony, nihilistic online culture. It's shared by other recent shooters, and don't ignore it. That's why it's critical for media outlets to start hiring deeply internet culture literate reporters who can understand at a glance what these messages are, what they mean, what they don't mean. The trans ideology turned out to be a video game reference.
Yes. Right.
And that's why when
they're
Cox
still scrambling
says,
to try to find something.
It's leftist stuff, wait and stay tuned, it'll turn out it's not. But I give him a pass because it's not like he's being deliberately mean. He just doesn't get it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably as charitable a read as you can give it. It's not that there are many Republicans out there working overtime to try to manufacture a way to blame this on transgender something. That's definitely true. But it would be easy to make that mistake if you didn't understand the inscriptions and somebody said it's a reference to, and it wasn't even a reference to anything trans. It was reference to a totally different subculture and its connection to its own strange and insular practices, let's say. But yeah, also a good point being made as some of the Republicans work overtime to come up with something. At first, it was, this is trans ideology. No, that turns out not to have any foundation at all. Maybe the shooter was trans, and no, that also turned out to have no foundation. So then it kind of came to, there's allegedly a cooperating witness who apparently was one of the shooter's roommates who may be or is, I don't know whether they decided, transgender, but this is somebody who was cooperating with the authorities and trying to help piece things together so that they could get some closure on this. But in the meantime, that then gets picked up by Republicans saying, see, this is the trans connection to blame for this. Well,
we don't even know if it is.
That.
I mean, they just pick up on stuff and say things. And these days, you have no idea.
Right. And so, the introduction of the idea may have been, mistaken but relatively benign. But then there were some bad actors who wanted to capitalize on that and did so immediately. By the way, a good point being made along the way this morning, offhandedly, the rude pundit, who everybody knows, I think, from social media, saying, I want to point out again that Jessica Watkins, a former Oath Keeper leader who rioted at the Capitol on January 6th and has since been had their sentence commuted, a transgender woman, by the way, a leader among the Oath Keepers. But just to remind everybody, stop assuming that someone is a wild lefty just because they're transgender. That
especially
has
in
nothing
Utah.
to do with it. Yeah, well, there's that, and I mean, Caitlyn Jenner would be another good example of, you know what? As it turns out, sometimes their gender identity, like with everybody else in the world, doesn't have a great deal to do with their political identification. That's not really a correlation in most cases, I think. Anyway, yes. So this has been a very interesting weekend, and I guess enlightening. A lot of people learning this, but as it turns out, a lot of people are only learning Charlie Kirk's name for the first time, and so they're getting a very weird and distorted picture. If you're a normie news consumer, you might not, they're firing anybody who will tell you what Charlie Kirk actually said during his lifetime.
Just like that.
And by the same token, now the people who are working to from these black pill corners, like, as she mentioned, Nick Fuentes, but also now joined by Jack Posobiec and other names that we've called out here on the show from time to time. They're all sort of jumping on the bandwagon and finding ways to be introduced through normie news culture, but they're introducing themselves to normies as the eulogizers of Charlie Kirk, angry with the people who don't understand what a great person he was, but they were bitterly at war with Kirk while he was alive.
Right, for influence and money.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are his rivals.
Yes, very interesting.
Yeah.
And
now, this is a piece by McKay Coppin.
Okay, yes.
From The Atlantic, talking about Spencer Cox.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start with something right in the middle of it, because he actually quoted, as opposed to paraphrased, what Cox said at his news conference, which got people's attention. Cox had admitted in his news conference, McKay Coppins writes, that he'd been quietly hoping for a different outcome. Quote, I was praying that if this had to happen here, it wouldn't be one of us, that somebody drove from another state, somebody came from another country, he'd said, but it did happen here, and it was one of us. And Coppin says the comment drew some criticism from people who accused him of seeking a politically convenient scapegoat, but I understood what he meant. I was born in Orem, says McKay Coppins, where Kirk's shooting took place, and though I grew up on the other side of the country, I chose to return to the area after high school, attending college 15 minutes from the now infamous campus of Utah Valley. It's difficult to overstate just how surreal it was to watch the macabre scene, the bullet, the blood, the screams, play out in the heart of a county so cartoonishly friendly and wholesome that Utahns refer to it as Happy Valley. For people like Cox, who had devoted themselves to realizing a certain idealized vision of Utah, the city on a hill, the beacon to the world, the assassination had a shattering effect. It does feel like there's a bit of our innocence lost. Cox told me last night we're kind of sheltered here in these mountains and valleys, and we push the world out, but the world is certainly here. It's at our doorstep. And again, I understand the idea of, paradise shattered by a bullet. I get that, really. My take was a little similar to, and I like that McKay Coppins uses exact words. I didn't. I was just paraphrasing. But what I wrote on Twitter over the weekend is, what does a compassionate Spencer Cox, because he was at his news conference, and right-wingers have in common with everybody else? And the answer is, your first impulse is somebody was shot, that's horrible. And the second impulse is, please let it not be one of us.
Yeah.
We all think that for various and different reasons. That's what Cox was saying. He didn't use the word immigrants. He didn't say, I hope it's an immigrant. He was expressing the idea that for various and sundry reasons, I don't want it to be one of us. If it's one of us, I was wrong about us.
Yeah,
if it was one of us, then the other side is going to make them a scapegoat and make me a scapegoat. I mean, there's 100 reasons why you would think that, but it's an idea that flashes through your mind. And the third impulse is normally what went wrong here with our Happy Valley. And the difference between Cox and the rest of the right wing is that he thinks what went wrong, I have to check it out, and the others are, it's immigrants, let's get them. You know? So that third impulse separates them, but the first two is like universal. Everybody thinks that. And so when he was expressing in his own way, I hope it's not one of us, to me, that's what he meant.
Yeah. That's it. Well, that's a good point, and I've learned a lot about the approaches people take to these situations in general, this one in particular, and why they happen, and which was good in a way. Well, actually, in all ways, I guess, just coming to understand where, we're supposed to be understanding where people are coming from. That doesn't necessarily mean reaching across the aisle and cooperating with them on everything, but understanding things and the dynamics that lead people to the conclusions they draw is always
we're liberals and progressives. We like to understand.
Yeah, we're supposed to. Whether or not we can do anything about it, we'll certainly convince ourselves that you should try if you can think of a good thing to do. But as opposed to, say, being a black pill nihilist, there's nothing you can do. Forget it. The best outcome possible is all out war. But yeah, this it's a very difficult to understand kind of mindset for a number of reasons, not the least of which is I'm not certain it's even a mindset. It's just a pastime more than anything else. And I don't know. I also thought, speaking of Spencer Cox and his performance at the press conferences, I guess the back to the black pill people and their interest in the kind of publicity they want. I think they think, I would not be surprised if they thought one of the biggest wins going, and the reason for, scrawling things on the bullet cases at all, I think the payoff was the last one, which they, so as Cox is telling people what information they've gleaned from this and his reading, well, there were some very odd inscriptions. Oh, really? What did they say? And he reads them out loud. And I'm sure they were howling watching somebody like Spencer Cox read their gobbledygook aloud on all the networks and then the big payoff, the last one, which was written on the case, was, if you're reading this, you're gay, LMAO. And which, of course, that's just, online, that's cheap. Everybody knows this joke trolling that they even do among themselves on that forum, because, of course, the joke is you've already read it. But I mean, I can't even imagine what they thought watching the governor read it on a news conference in this solemn moment. That must have been the biggest win ever for them.
Yeah, let me read this paragraph from McKay Coppin's piece, which I think is just super interesting, about how if you're older and you read it but don't totally understand it, you get it but you don't get it.
Yeah.
Cox told me he had no doubt the alleged suitor's worldview had been warped in some very dark corners of the internet, and watching the online discourse around Kirk's murder this week only underscored the damage done by algorithmically incentivized ghoulishness. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the quote. Discord, 4chan, Twitter, Blue Sky. These things are really hacking our brains and hijacking our agency.
Wow.
Cox told Coppins, the worst of humanity is in our pockets.
Holy moly.
I mean, you get it. You've heard the terms. You don't really understand them. You lump them together. That's why I think it's important to understand that each is different.
Mm-hmm.
4chan isn't Discord. Discord isn't Twitter. Twitter is not Blue Sky.
Mm-hmm.
The worst of humanity is in our pockets. Yeah,
Holy
maybe. Even
cow.
the most carefully constructed sanctuary can't withstand an onslaught like the one generated by Silicon Valley. It's a Silicon Valley attack on Happy Valley, in his view. And so that's how he's looking at it, and that's how you can lump Blue Sky in there and say, okay, they're all the same. They're not. Any more than Nick Fuentes is the same as Charlie Kirk. They're not.
No.
They come from different places. And again, I think it's really important to understand that.
That's a great illustration right there. What did they say? It was like 4chan.
Discord, Twitter, and Blue Sky.
Wow.
All the same.
It reminds me
between them.
of many, many millions of years ago when, we were calling for blogger ethics conferences back in the day. Right. But I recall, newspaper editorialists saying, we got to do something about this. It's such a problem. The bloggers are doing these various things in there, and it's terrible. And it's like, you guys, again, don't really even understand the terms you're using here. Like, blogs are just a communication tool. Like, it would never have made any sense for you in the 50s to say, we got to do something about the telephoners. They're communicating things amongst each other in secret code. And we got to get rid of these. We got to control the use of these telephones so that this doesn't happen anymore.
What does the best, fanciest, but really good food Cajun restaurant in New Orleans have in common with McDonald's? They both serve food, so they're both the same.
Okay, I get you. Yeah, right. Well,
so we could eat at either one. What's the difference? It'll be the same experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, for some people, that's probably unfortunately true. But yeah,
they may choose McDonald's, but even they would acknowledge it's not the same.
Right. We hope so. Yeah, the other stuff is not as good as hamburgers.
Hamburgers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
wow.
Okay. But again, I think it's really important to understand what people don't understand. It's important to get that most news media don't really get this stuff. It's important to understand that Spencer Cox does and doesn't. He's open-minded enough to have learned all this stuff in the last 2 weeks, but not enough so he really understands the difference.
Feels like 2 weeks. It's been, 2 days, but yeah. Well, there's a number of other very interesting analyses on there that I will add to the picture, and I can add them during the second hour, certainly. But what else might you wish to? You want to weave anything else in there, or any other?
Well, here's Heather Cox Richardson writing on September 12th. Before all of this came to a head, they caught him and all this stuff. Robinson, that's the guy, had recently had a conversation with a family member about why they didn't like Kirk's viewpoints. Robinson appears to have admired the Groypers, led by Nick Fuentes, who complained that more mainstream organizations like Kirk's Turning Point USA are not pro-white enough and have publicly harassed Kirk in the past. The rumors the shooter had engraved anti-fascist rhetoric on some of the bullet casings found that the scene turned out to be a misunderstanding of terms in the video game Helldivers 2. The claim he had used transgender ideology was apparently a misreading of the head stamp TRN that marks ammunition as a product of Turkish manufacturer Turan. I mean, all the stuff that they got wrong.
Wow. Yeah, they definitely got that. I didn't even realize that they thought that they were. I thought it was a misunderstanding of the one of the first memes, which actually were apparently has an underlying reference to furry culture.
Yeah,
and they misunderstood that as transgender. I have seen the pictures of the ammunition, and it really, honestly, the name of the manufacturer is abbreviated and stamped on the bottom TRN, and that's all. That could be train, that could be anything. It's the name of the manufacturer, in fact, but to transmute that into trans with no S in this. What are you talking about?
It stands for to right, newbie.
Yeah, right. That's
everybody
insane.
knows that. Why don't you know
that part
that?
of it is like you don't even. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah.
You already have an idea and you're trying to fit it in.
That's really super crazy. At least something he wrote on the things himself would be presumably some kind of a message, even if you don't understand it. But wow, I mean, it says made in China. It was a Chinese assassin. Oh my God, what's wrong with you? Well, all right.
Almost as soon as Robinson was identified, and you mentioned this, so I want to highlight it. The tone of MAGA leaders' conversation about the shooting changed.
Yes.
Representative Nancy Mace, who had used a slur to refer to the shooter as pro-transgender, she said pro-tranny, if you didn't catch that. And she tossed off the term as if she's totally comfortable with it. It's just,
she is.
In and of itself in a different world would have been amazing. Posted on social media, we know Charlie Kirk would want us to pray for such an evil and lost individual like Tyler Robinson to find Jesus Christ. We'll try to do the same.
Is that right?
Not the attitude she had just prior to finding out, it's a conservative white Utah, I think I'll change my tune.
Yeah,
there's the other part that Heather Cox Richardson highlights, of course, is the important one.
Mm-hmm.
Trump seemed to have lost interest in Kirk even earlier.
Yeah.
Right. And this is a full statement, not taken out of context.
Please.
Right. And this is George W. Bush. It's a terrible thing. Watch my drive.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I see.
Yesterday evening, a reporter offered the president his condolences on the loss of his friend Charlie Kirk and asked Trump how he was holding up. And it was a very compassionate question. And the president answered in full. Mm-hmm. I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks. They just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, for 150 years. It's going to be a beauty.
Yeah. That was a good answer.
That's how much he cared about Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
I can't make the guy into a super enemy like at the top of my head. I'll just change the topic.
That's kind of what it seemed like to me. And the previous, Nancy Mace, right? Well, basically, she was screaming slurs when, I guess to run it in parallel to what Spencer Cox was saying. When I first heard that he had been assassinated, I was pretty sure that it was somebody that I could attack because of some stereotype and lead my troops against them. Then I found out, contrary to my prayers, it was one of us, sort of, and all of a sudden it was like, well, this poor misguided soul. I know Charlie would have wanted us to pray for them. Oh, that is a very different approach. The Trump one is insane. And by the way, lest anybody think that it was a one-off, he did that pivot twice. I've seen him do it twice. Once on the White House lawn, I think, when asked by a reporter, how are you holding up? I know Charlie Kirk was a friend of yours, blah, 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 ballroom. And once on that Fox Morning News appearance that he did while he was up in New York, same thing, different approach to the question, but basically, what do you think about what's going on with Charlie Kirk and what a great loss he is? Yes, but or where were you when you heard that I was working on planning the new ballroom, which is going to be, and he did the same line, beautiful, 150 years, yada, yada, yada. By the way, it's been 150. The reason it was 150 years ago is that was the last time ballrooms were relevant, but okay. But yeah, this is the great loss that he's suffering here. But a lot of people changed their tune on a dime when they found out, like Spencer Cox did, that it wasn't the person that they thought or they were hoping it might be. He was fearing it might be. Wow. All right. Well, we've magically got to the end of an hour.
We do that. And then I'll see you Wednesday and we'll do it again.
Yeah, probably. And it'll probably be similar subjects, too.
It'll probably be similar to an hour.
Okay. Yeah, we'll keep it around that. I think that's a good amount of time. Thanks, Greg. See you in a day or two. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. You could, I don't know if you should, but you could stay on Charlie Kirk forever because, well, really just parsing the nuance of the bad takes in the wake of his death, and wouldn't even really have that much necessarily to do with his death. But at any rate, I don't know whether we'll want to do that, but we might end up doing that. I'm watching my Blue Sky feed here, and I just want to call this one out in particular. I guess, again, another example of things being so confusing and intentionally confusing, that was the point, that almost any interpretation can be gleaned out of it. Although, as time goes on, to you and I, anyway, certain takes are becoming more and more glaringly stupid and brazenly counterfactual. But the issue is that there's a significant portion of the world and the American public that is likely to accept these explanations for various reasons. What I'm looking at right now is the Daily Beast posting on Blue Sky, that evil, horrible, same thing as Discord network, right? Carrie Lake. Okay, you're automatic. Good. Your instincts, your protective instinct is up. Oh no, Carrie Lake is saying something that's going to be terrible and wrong. You're right. It is. Carrie Lake said the suspect in Charlie Kirk's murder, right? We've just learned, well, maybe we're biased in leaning into the explanation that was given by that excellent video and others like it. And there's an excess now, thankfully, of such reporting, of people stepping forward and offering this explanation. And it seems correct and likely and logical to us. Is it necessarily the exactly right explanation? No, maybe not. Or would the shooter and his friends agree that they hit the nail on the head? But no, probably not. But then also part of the ongoing joke, as they would see it, is that even if you did hit the nail on the head, they would tell you didn't hit the nail on the head. And they might even think they mean it too. But they certainly wouldn't want to acknowledge to you that you understood it unless you were one of them. But just as sensible as that explanation well, not sensible, but just as plausible as that explanation would be to us, I guess there's a section in the world that will believe this. We find it more plausible to think that he was, to the extent that he was brainwashed, if that's even the right word for it, is that he was steeped in this black-pilled nihilist culture. But Carrie Lake wants you to think that he was brainwashed and steeped in a different nihilistic culture. Now, what's the culture that she claims did it? College. Now, that's a tough sell, I think, for most normies. Carrie Lake said the suspect in Charlie Kirk's murder was, quote, brainwashed by attending college, labeling the educational institutions, all of them, of course, indoctrination camps. And that is central to the current Trump world project of, as one of them said specifically and outright at some point early on in the fight with Harvard and other of the elite institutions, that the goal was to take down, I think Chris Rufo, to take down and destroy at least one of these elite and elitist institutions. Harvard would be the most natural among them, but that they were going to demonstrate to the rest of the higher education world the power of Trumpism by destroying, a seemingly timeless and without end elite institution like Harvard University. That must mean they can get to all of us. And so, so that's it. So that's part of the project. Well, the reason this terrible tragedy happened, is education. Sure. And specifically universities, because of course all the liberal professors, and they all have tenure, and they indoctrinate people with trans ideology, and so now, by the way, a rampage across the country to fire professors who say anything that could be construed even incorrectly, wildly incorrectly, as the wrong thing about Charlie Kirk, which is to say, in many cases, telling people, hey, you may have had this impression of Charlie Kirk, but as it turns out, he also said this, this, and this, and these things are problematic. And people, in the wake of his death, and it being a particularly public and grisly murder, are able to appeal to the emotions out there, particularly of people who didn't know who Charlie Kirk was at all, one way or the other, or especially, I guess, if people who only understood one of, the Christian fundamentalist nice guy image that he portrayed elsewhere, and then they hear you saying, he said this, this, and this, and first they think you're making it up, and even if they don't think you're making it up, at a minimum, it's inappropriate to talk about that. Now he's just died in this horrible murder, and why can't you think of his wife and children? And, leveraging that into, and so therefore it's inappropriate, and therefore you're fired. So there's an attack on academia underway already. They're using this to leverage out individuals who don't, as they say, their own claim, mourn appropriately. Like, why do you have to mourn at all? There's no public requirement of mourning for somebody you didn't know. You can mourn for the state of the country, possibly. But anyway, yeah. So in addition to their attack on individuals and in academia and academic institutions, there's this idea we can say it wasn't Discord, and nobody's saying it was Discord itself that did this, but it wasn't black-pilled nihilist subculture that he was steeping in. It was universities, education, attending college, and I mean that's not even a claim that you can make with a straight face, I would think normally. But on top of that, as it turns out, would fact get in the way? I think he attended one semester of college and then dropped out. And by the way, we're still in the stage where the facts, quote unquote facts around this kid, never mind the kid, murderer, which he would be happy about, I'm sure, are still in flux. Like first round of information, quote unquote information about the shooter. Well, he attended one semester of college and it appears to have dropped out. And it might even have been this college where he shot Kirk. And I'm not even certain whether that one held up. But among other facts that, quote unquote facts is regular. Well, his father, his father is a cop. And it turns out, no, he's not. What are you talking about? He has the same name as a guy who's a cop. Well, the family name's Robinson. I think that's probably going to happen. What a dumb mistake that was. But I don't know. So a couple of things that they've called out about him that have turned out not to be true. But imagine coming out of this and saying, the indoctrination is college, one semester. And then he went on, by the way, to trade school, like I think training as an electrician's apprentice and going to trade school for, the famous indoctrination camps of trade schools. But she's out there making speeches and still circulating this kind of stupid claim. And, everybody else is, watching something completely different. So speaking of watching something completely different, I guess I should have left that one open because I could have showed it to you. And now I closed it and it's gone. But I'm going to go search for it so I can read it to you. But while I'm searching, I saw something maybe you had. It was very widely circulated. So on social media. So maybe you had a chance to see it. If you didn't, I will bring it around to you here. Oh, here's the Carrie Lake thing. But I got to scroll back to find it. But I think somebody's, I assume, Facebook postings from over the weekend, which I thought were very enlightening and I hope are really true and was really posted somewhere. That's one of the downfalls of relying on people's Facebook postings or other people's screenshots of other people's Facebook postings, etc., etc. But here we are. Is this one it? No. This is, I got to keep scrolling. This is a second set of Facebook postings. But somebody basically describing their encounter with a person that they knew and they were friendly with and they had some bond of trust, some basis on which to have a discussion like this, thankfully, who had the opposite impression of Charlie Kirk. Not that they had never heard of him, but that they affirmatively held a super positive view of him. And you find that hard to believe, right? So let's see. Here is the I think the original provenance of this on Blue Sky was a guy by the name of Rob, but Rob will letter B at Blue Sky or .bluesky.social, who I don't know do we know him? Well, no, but a writer, and is from his bio, writer and copy editor, copy editorial director at Bona Books. British Fantasy Award finalist, Jim Henson expert, for instance. Anyway, interesting normal person background. And then this collection of screenshots from Facebook was reposted by somebody else that you may know, Claire Willett, who I think circles overlap. I've seen Claire's cartoon avatar several times. Who grabbed it and recirculated, and I think that's the way it made it into my timeline, but recirculated it with alt text, which, in the heat of the moment, sometimes gets in the way and people don't remember to include it in their posts. Blue Sky culture is big on that, including the alt text. And I know sometimes myself, I've skipped it a couple of times and I understand. But anyway, it was important to do because more people needed to see it. And as a matter of fact, by doing so, by reposting it, that's how it got into my line of sight. Here's, though, the text of these screen grabs. One thing that has become really clear since yesterday is that we live in at least two different realities, and I'm sure it's many more than that. Talking to a friend who only knew Charlie as a Christian motivational speaker. That's a very different description of Charlie Kirk than you and I may have known ahead of time. Only knew Charlie as a Christian motivational speaker because that's all that ever came across her feed. Well, she showed me videos I'd never seen before of him saying perfectly reasonable and empowering things. I mean, a very different picture of Charlie Kirk, right? Well, I showed her videos that she'd never seen before of his racism, misogyny, homophobia, advocating for violence against specific groups of people. She was horrified by his remarks about Pelosi's husband's attacker. That and those remarks were that some patriot, as he said, should bail him out of jail, and then he'd be celebrated as a hero. Not only the patriot who bailed him out, but the attacker even. She was horrified by his remarks about Pelosi's husband's attacker being bailed out and celebrated for his violent act. She was horrified by a number of things that he said, but she had never seen or heard them before. The same as I had never seen or heard the generalized clips of him sounding like a perfectly nice, loving man and father. Neither of us had the whole picture of this man. I mentioned that he was a known white supremacist, and she thought I was joking. She talked about him giving a speech about finding your purpose and doing good in the world, and I thought she was joking. I could totally see that. I saw why this friend of mine was mourning the loss of a person that she thought was a good person. My friend, bless her, saw why I feel the way I do about him, or the way I feel about him. We understood each other better. In spite of a multi-billion-dollar internet machine specifically focused on keeping us apart. And that's an interesting point all by itself. That's the role of the algorithms here, which is interesting too, because I don't know that I would necessarily say, at least in its original incarnation, that the algorithms, at least of Facebook, were designed to keep them apart so much as they were just designed to give them what they want, and because they wanted different things, or the algorithm thought they wanted different things, they began feeding them different things. It's at heart, it was supposed to be some kind of neutral engagement machine. Give them more of whatever will keep them on the service and keep them clicking on our feeds. But it ended up becoming a way to create two very different realities. And then I think once they realized that that was the case, that was subsequently exploited. And maybe our first exposure to that would have been the Cambridge Analytica style driver of targeted advertising in the 2016 election. And then from then on forward, where, the supposed geniuses of online targeting were in fact serving not only very different, but completely opposite and contradictory messages to two different kinds of fan of Donald Trump and driving them to the polls. And this was kind of a mystery to all of us who think that, well, the success of political messaging and electoral messaging in particular is consistency and consistently delivering the same message. And you certainly can't, but, by the same token, I would say probably we have to have been familiar over our political lifetimes of the politicians telling different crowds what they think they want to hear, but hopefully not directly contradictory. Maybe there would be some nuance or shading, but in fact, it turned out that that the algorithm and hyper targeting enables telling different crowds of people totally different messaging, and then they probably won't bump into each other and share the news that they've been targeted with completely contradictory messaging because they move in different circles. But I guess it's like, I guess to understand, like, why would you be doing something like that? Remember what we learned in our first video, that there are there's overlap, but very much at their heart, they're very much different communities. Let's say either the Christian nationalist fundamentalist crowd or the black-pilled nihilist crowd, or even the black-pilled accelerationists versus tech bro accelerationists. Very different focus and purpose and language and usage of the internet even, but then sometimes they overlap. And I guess that will also be the case too. If you have two major parties contending every election here, you're going to have two big tents out there, right? And so long as you land in the tent where you're pulling the lever or marking the box or whatever for Donald Trump, they don't, care very much why you're there, just so long as you get there. And if they can draw you in with black-pilled nihilism, that's where you are, they will find you there and pull you in. If they can do it with, uplifting Christian messaging, they will do that there too. I mean, it's how else do you reconcile people cheering for the language of the Access Hollywood tape? I'm voting for him because he said you can grab him by the pussy, and if you're a star, they'll let you do it. I admire that. And get those people in the same tent with Christian fundamentalists who are family values voters. And the answer is you got to serve them totally different garbage and tell them the same guy can service both needs here. And don't worry about the other part, or ignore the other part, or let's pretend that you will never find out about the other part. So back to this Facebook post here. I saw why my friend was mourning the loss of a person she thought was a good person. My friend, bless her, saw that the way I feel I do about him. We understood each other better in spite of a multi-billion-dollar internet machine specifically focused on keeping us apart. Because we talked to each other with the desire to listen and to learn rather than a desire to change someone else's mind or to be right, quote unquote, right. And I know some of us will roll our eyes at that and say, but isn't that what misguided punditry is always exhorting us to do? Well, perhaps they're exhorting us to do it on a macro level and as between entire parties and entire movements. But on a person-to-person level, it can be done. That's certainly true. And, if you have the opportunity to do it, you should open up to it. None of those motivational things that he said, Charlie Kirk said, change my opinion about him because they don't erase the negativity. The subtle, and I would say probably also not so subtle, calls for violence, the belittling and denigrating of other races, religions, genders, etc. His negative and blaming comments about homeless people, the poor, and victims of domestic violence. His comments about rounding up people who didn't think like him and putting them in camps where their behavior could be corrected. And by the way, yes, acknowledging the Brian Kilmeade episode over the weekend, or leading into the weekend too, in which he just blithely blurts out on the air in the middle of, which is exactly what they wanted, on the air in the middle of Fox News broadcast that, by the way, homeless people are such annoying eyesores, they should all be killed by lethal injection. And then he offers an apology, which was mere pretty weak. You have to have a hell of an apology to come back from that one. But forget come back. Like any other network, that person's fired, right? Presumably, or any if there is an equivalent left-ish ideology, the person would be. I can't think. What's the leftish equivalent of murder all the homeless people? Well, there is none. Sorry, but there you have it. He's still working. So that's the difference between us and them, basically. But that's what they think is the difference between us and them. They think, they used the Charlie Kirk thing. By the way, all the Republicans were all over social media and traditional media saying, repeating the line that I don't understand why the left gets away with all of this murder all the time. First of all, our claim that the shooter was a leftist. Second of all the political violence is leftist against right-wing speech. Like, as upside down and backwards as you could possibly describe the current situation. But there are news networks where that's the preferred content. That's the what the algorithm wants to serve. Anyway, back to this piece here. None of the motivational things he had said changed my opinion because I had seen too much, essentially, of the other stuff. His comments about rounding people up who didn't think like him and putting them in camps where their behavior could be corrected. That time he said empathy was a made-up word that he didn't believe in. That other time that he said the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. The time he said most people are afraid when they get on a plane and they see there's a black pilot. His anti-vaccination rhetoric and active campaigning against people being allowed to wear masks for their own health, which, by the way, his organization, Turning Point USA, the two co-founders, both now dead, Charlie Kirk being one of them, arguably killed by that thing which they dismissed as a danger to society, guns for Charlie Kirk, and the other co-founder whose name we just don't think about very much. He was sort of the silent partner, the money behind establishing Turning Point USA. Much older guy, had, once again, millions or possibly billions at his disposal, and decided to do so politically. One of his chief boogeymen, masking during COVID. Ridiculous. COVID, it's just like the flu. And then he died of COVID. So, by the way, anybody looking for indications of the will of God in all of this, in case there's anybody involved in the Charlie Kirk world that has anything to do with looking for messaging from God. Oh, COVID's a joke. Don't pay it any attention. Oh, yeah? Death by COVID. Guns, it's all worth it because Second Amendment. Oh, yeah? Guns. So, I don't understand how that's not messaging from God for people who believe in that sort of direct DMs from God. But anyway, just throwing that out there. And I guess if I were a professor, I would be fired for that one. But back once again to this very long Facebook post. Where do we leave off? Right. His anti-vaccination rhetoric, his active campaigning against people being allowed to wear masks for their own health, his open support of fascism and white supremacy. To me, all of those are fully unchristian sentiments. And you can see why. Those are undeniable, and just one of them would be a deal breaker for me. All of them together are a picture of a man who was polarizing, enraged a lot of people, and rightly so. But even with all of that, I would never wish upon him, or especially his children, the end that he got. Oh, and my friend had never heard, and God help me, I don't know how she escaped the news. She had never heard of the Minnesota legislators who were just shot in June. If you want to know what kind of hold the algorithm has over people. It's one thing. It's a lot easier to believe that, on my feed, Charlie Kirk is a positive, uplifting, Christian, God-fearing man. Okay, but I also if you want to know what kind of bubble it creates for people, entirely missed the news of the legislators in Minnesota who were killed. The husband and wife and dog who were killed at one of the houses. One, after throwing themselves over their child to protect the child. By the way, as much as people lamented the effects of Charlie Kirk's murder on his children and his family, Charlie Kirk did not have to throw his body over his children to protect them from the bullets. Anyway, the other couple in Minnesota who somehow survived politically motivated attacks specifically because they were Democrats. She learned about those shootings that happened months ago. Why? Because I showed her Charlie Kirk's comments about them. The only way to that could be fake news for all I don't know if she was somebody who would fall back on fake news. It doesn't sound like it actually. But let me not only show you that this happened, I will show you Charlie Kirk not caring that happened. And she also, I guess, had not heard about the kidnapping plot against, as he puts it here, a female Midwestern Democratic governor, the assassination attempt against Pennsylvania's Democratic governor, all things Charlie had plenty to say about, while supporting the Second Amendment and bashing the Democratic Party. She didn't know about any of it because we're all living in two different worlds and none of us have the whole story. So, important point at the end, none of us have the whole story. That has to be acknowledged. But just in case you didn't think that was possible, well, it is, and it's happening. And I mean, I guess it's happening. Maybe it isn't happening. I have no idea. It's all fake news. But that is certainly entirely believable. Okay, I don't know what else to tell you. My goodness, the things that are transpiring on social media right now, inexplicable. At any rate, time for us to get ready for our third and last break. And there's much other news to cover. I know it's all been about Charlie Kirk, but I guess since it's fascinating the world at this point, and there really is an important reason why we need to kind of try to dive into this and understand that it's not necessarily the case that he was a Republican, so he must have been assassinated by a Democrat. I know that's the only choice the two-party system gives us, but this doesn't have anything to do with party systems. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I'd like to try to migrate away from the Charlie Kirk thing, but I do have this to add, and let me see if I can engineer opening this up. Scott sent me something in the middle of our discussion of all this with Craig. Thank you, Scott, for getting that one to me. And I just love playing that. This is from another one of the video machines that I don't use, Threads. And just as every news organization would benefit from having somebody literate in these subcultures and the inner workings and the difference between the platforms that color the type of discourse that happens on them, right? I'm struck by every once in a while when you find out that the relevant piece of information was garnered from Getter or Rumble or whatever, or even in some cases Discord. Discord, I think, probably more widely used by a larger and more disparate group of people than any of the explicitly right-wing platforms like Getter or Rumble, but the fact that there are multiple is something. But anyway, yeah, I just as every outlet would benefit from having somebody literate and all of that. I've resisted, spending any amount of time on TikTok, but for various reasons. One, lots of people are suggesting to me that we could grow the audience by disseminating bits and pieces of the show via TikTok. Although I have a feeling that the TikTok audience would be like, why is this old man on my TikTok? This is so dumb. I'm not going to listen to this guy. But, maybe the more appropriate place would be like YouTube Shorts or something like that. I don't know. But it doesn't matter because I don't feel like doing either one of them. But I know I probably should. But anyway, TikTok, valuable stuff to be gleaned there. Threads as well. And because of the way the show running computer is set up, it's sometimes a little difficult to get a hold of this thing. But I just thought I mailed it to myself and it didn't work. We'll try this again. But anyway, what Scott had sent me was Jake Bro, Broe, on Threads, offering what I guess someone else had offered as the best explanation I've seen of Tyler Robinson's motives for assassinating Charlie Kirk. And we really, all you can do is say we're speculating on all that. And this is, I guess, similar speculation, but informed speculation, not unlike the other video. But the question now is how to get that audio onto the show, because I thought I emailed it to myself and it's not showing up in my email. So that seems, that makes me unhappy, to say the least. I'll try it one more time, I guess, but playing it off my phone is a very poor idea, I think. Did I just maybe possibly not complete the work? Let's give this a shot and see if that went or not. But it doesn't seem to be registering for some reason here. But some of these platforms make it very difficult to do in between one platform to another. But this will require, of course, shutting down Instapaper and then reopening and hoping that it's there, and then playing it on the laptop, and picking it up off laptop speakers to microphone on the other computer. Will this even show it to me is the next question, and it's not entirely clear that it will. But let's try opening it in the browser out of Instagram. Now we're moving over to Threads, and who knows whether it's going to play this thing or not. But I did see this video, and it's just not going to. Why is it always so? It's so interesting how if you're trying to suck people into one of these, an alternative, addictive social media platform, why the compatibility problems? I mean, they seem intentional, but if you want people to, get sucked in and get addicted to your content, you're going to have to be willing to show it to them. Could I do it off of my phone audio? Maybe. Let's see. Will this even allow me to, all right, will this allow me to pause it? That's question one.
What's that?
There we are. All right, let's see if we can get some of this.
The casing on the shot that ended Charlie Kirk's life was engraved with a 12-year-old furry bashing meme. Notice his bulge, ooh woo, what's that? Which tells us an important thing. This assassination was a shitpost. That is the lens to analyze it through. Another of the casings references a video game, Helldivers 2, and a specific bomb that you could send on your enemies in the game with the command up, right, down, down, down. This command line sort of became a meme in image boards where it would be deployed to kind of represent, ending an argument, but almost more so as just like, if you know, you know. And
I'm going to stop it at this point because it's very much, I think, very similar. But I did see this video, and it's an excellent one. It's a slightly more concise explanation than the one we were listening to earlier. That was an 8-minute long thing. Plus, of course, I don't think the audio is really helping anybody at this point in the way I've been forced to deliver it. But at any rate, I think I want to move on from that subject, although I'm sure I'll be drawn back to it at some point. But there were several other things, of course, happening in the news, which are of the utmost importance. And some of them will end up having to wait for later in the week. And by the way, I should also point out that one of the early warnings about the nature of the bullet inscriptions, or the apparent bullet inscriptions, no one knows whether they really happened or not, and the possibility, now I think a growing likelihood, although there was a lot of pushback on this as well from our own progressive circles about whether or not this was possibly an intramural fight between different factions of the ultra-right. But Dave Newert, our own sort of Netroots in-house expert on all of this, was early on the scene on Friday, posting just after the end of this show, as a matter of fact, but like 11:30 in the morning on Friday. Just a gentle reminder, he said, that white nationalist groypers like Troy Robinson, he just jumps right to it, have long plagued Charlie Kirk's operations because he wasn't racist, homophobic, or anti-Semitic enough. My own shorthand for that is to call back to Greg's warnings about the unpopularity of the Affordable Care Act at a certain point in the work towards its passage, and people pointing to it and saying, see, it's unpopular. But as we were pointing out that some significant percentage of people here were answering from the left, this thing doesn't go far enough, and it's unpopular with me for that reason. Anyway, but Dave points to a piece that he published in Daily Kos some time ago. I mean, really some time ago. This is November 2019 that he's posting on what, if you spent any time, and I do recommend that you do it. This is one of these instances where you can say, you know what, Wikipedia will do a fairly good job getting you up to speed on what's a groyper, if you never heard us mention it. And I mean, we have mentioned it, and sometimes we explain it and sometimes we don't. And it's Groyper. But seriously, if you're confused at this point, go ahead to Wikipedia. I endorse the use of Wikipedia in a lot of things, really, but in this one as well. What's a groyper? Who's Nick Fuentes? Fuentes. There's lots of profiles of him. Greg meant to share one of them on the air. I don't think we got around to it, but groypers, and now people who are in the know about these guys will have documented this 2019 event now as, I think, the first of two groyper wars, as they call them. The war has never heated up to shooting until just now, but this is a 2019 piece. Alt-right trolls, remember when we used to use that term more often, alt-right? Alt-right trolls make life miserable for you, me, Obama? No, Charlie Kirk and his Turning Point USA Culture War tour. And now he's on a different one of these tours. He was killed in the middle of his, what is it? I don't remember what he had dubbed this tour, but it was imprinted on the canopy that he was sitting under when he made his, when he was killed. But this is the thing. This is his constant vocation, touring college campuses, and what he thinks would be trolling libs. But then it turns out that the ultra right groypers found out they could troll him at these events. It's actually important background. And though I, didn't mean to stick on this subject, and so therefore I want to jump off it, I highly recommend it. If only because this was setting out a marker in 2019 showing that there's a division between these two, and it's bitter and antagonistic and dangerous. And one of the sides in this fight is insanely nihilistic and possibly violent. And as it turns out, they turned out to be, in fact, very violent. And not just from this Charlie Kirk event in the last 2 to 3 days. How many days are we gone from this already? But even then, and all I can tell you is this was a situation in which he thought he was doing his shtick is touring college campuses and challenging, bring me your best lib debaters and I'll debate them and I'll show everybody and I will convince the young voters of America that they should be ultra conservatives like me because I will roast the hell out of these unsuspecting kids who think they can debate. But, if you have a debate in front of a rigged audience, you're going to win a debate. Well, Nick Fuentes figured out that you could rig the audience in the other direction, and he was reveling in watching on live stream his supporters go and answer or offer trick gotcha type setup questions and try to shout over Charlie Kirk. And Charlie Kirk made things very uncomfortable for him in 2019, and this has been done more than once. And it's a very antagonistic thing. And now it has, if this is what it's about, culminated in the murder of Charlie Kirk, possibly by one of these guys. Why would you take it to that level? Don't you know you're going to pay the ultimate price? Yes. But remember, these are some black-pilled people. They just sort of think that life is just not worth living at this point. And it should surprise no one, of course, that the headline from in the Charlie Kirk investigations, such as they may be, yesterday and into today was, though they have the shooter in custody and though he has maybe confessed, and it's not entirely clear that he has confessed, but he hasn't denied or something, but he turned himself in. So there's that. What does it mean? Nobody knows. But apparently not cooperating with authorities. Turned himself in, but not cooperating with authorities. Yeah, that should probably never be a surprise. But what about the fact that he turned himself in? Yeah, well, maybe he's still trolling you. And I thought it was interesting, too, like, what kind of explanation is he going to offer? You should be viewing what he tells the police and what the police relay to you through the news about what he says in the same light you regarded the Ghislaine Maxwell interview with Todd Blanche. You don't know what you're getting here. And I mean, what's the motivation for him to tell you the true motive when the true motive, as it turns out, may have been to lie to people and troll them about what the true motive is? Well, but you can't just, now he's in the hands of the authorities. You can't just continue to do that. This isn't just, LOL YOLO garbage on one of the forums. This is the United States government, goddammit. Well, so what? What are you gonna add a perjury charge on top of the murder? Not a lot of incentive for him to give you the precise explanation at this point. He's, I guess, still playing the game, still trying to convince the rest of the shooter fandom that they should put his name on their guns when they do their shootings. And, meekly surrendering and handing yourself over and telling the truth about it or whatever is probably not part of the game plan at this point. And you'll learn about how long this has been going on by reading David Nearworth's piece from 2019 setting this all up. And there are plenty of other examples, and I got a bunch of them, a dozen of them in Instapaper, and each one of them, it pains me not to read to you at this particular point. But you need to know about several of the other things that have happened, including, let's see, I mentioned to you that Trump did, in fact, make an appearance in transit from the golf weekend back to the White House. And so one of the things you need to know is what was captured in his exchange about the Venezuelan boat, which we're still trying to figure out, the rest of us still trying to figure out exactly what the hell was this thing, what was going on. And he had this by way of explanation, I guess. One reporter asked him or mentioned to him that the president of Venezuela called the strike on the boat illegal. What do you make of that? And Trump's answer, apparently, what's illegal, and I mean, we could play you the video here, but it's not quite set up, but sometimes when he's at the airport, the audio is horrific. Let's see what this is like. You going with this? Yeah, in fact, it's garbage. So lots of airplane noise there in the background, jet engines running. The president of Venezuela called the strike on the boat illegal. Well, what's illegal is the fact that, are you ready for this one? 300 million people died last year from drugs. That, of course, basically the entire population of the United States of America. So you're dead from drugs, just in case you were wondering why you're feeling so groggy this morning. Now, there are more than 300 million. So some of us have survived to tell the tale. That has to be true. But, I mean, this is just, again, Trump brain working on the problem. That's not an answer, even if one person died from drugs last year, but let alone the fact that you think that 300 million have done so. There was another thing somewhere in Instapaper here is another story I never got around to doing because of how many otherwise super important things were happening. But there was an instance recently that I thought was of some importance, just to, get some insight once again into the Trump brain rot, which is different from black pill brain rot. That's a term that they're using for the kind of black pill worldview, brain rot on there. But Trump is actually having, pieces of his brain fall out his ears. But from The Guardian some time ago, but just again to remind you of where his brain is, what is this, September 6th? I don't know. We might as well just randomly include this one here. From The Guardian, the headline is, Trump apparently misled by video of 2020 protests. Threatens to send troops to yet another city. This time, Portland, Oregon. What happened? He's now saying, I'm going to send my troops here, there, the other thing. Oh, and by the way, I also should update. I think last week I made reference to the fact that the idea that Chicago, the threatened invasion of Chicago seems to be now, I think I said, off the table, and that instead he was going to be going elsewhere, that he found it easier to target blue cities in states with Republican governors so he could manipulate them into using the National Guard there. But probably not an accurate description of conditions on the ground in Chicago. I think it was a better reflection seems to be that Trump shied away from trying to federalize the Illinois National Guard and deploy them to Chicago, and maybe even accepting National Guard troops from other states and having them deployed in Chicago. But the rest of federal law enforcement, the types that he surged alongside National Guard troops into D.C., are in fact working in Chicago and making life miserable in Chicago, just in the absence of National Guard troops or regular Army troops. So it's slightly different ballgame, but not taking the harassment of the city of Chicago off the board, but taking the National Guard off the board for whatever reason there, just because he found it easier, I think, legally to do this elsewhere. Anyway, I guess then it was he started to float different cities. He was thinking about either New Orleans or Nashville or other places where he could find and target Democratic cities in red states. But Portland, Oregon, another harping point of his, was on the list. And the reason was somebody essentially showed him video of what I think is George Floyd protests from 2020 and just told him this is happening right now in Portland. And the dumb president, commander-in-chief, access to all the intelligence, the greatest intelligence machines, used to be the greatest. Well, this one was a pretty crappy intelligence machine, I guess, but a vast intelligence machine, to say the least, to say, if nothing else, vast, and using it not at all. Here's a picture. What is it? It's a thing that I need you to think it is so that you will do the thing I want. And it worked. I mean, so long story short there, U.S. president mistakes scale of anti-ICE rallies, which are in fact currently happening in Portland, after TV report uses old footage from George Floyd demonstrations, which is a common online Republican troll trick, except this time it was done by, I guess, a TV broadcast, although I'd be curious to know which one it is. And I'm looking to see if I can find that quickly in my scan, but it's not. Fox News. I mean, no surprise there. I was just sort of, well, is it Right Wing News Network or One American News Network, or is it Fox? The president did not cite the specific newscast or news report that he was basing his impression on, but Fox News broadcast a report on Thursday, back in early September, that mixed images of a recent protest in Portland, attended by dozens of protesters, with a viral video clip from 2020 of one protester, Christopher David, being pepper sprayed in the face by a federal agent that was wrongly described as having been shot in June of this year. So you see what's going on as between that and AI slop that's being served up elsewhere. Like, for instance, in anti-immigrant protests in the UK, and Elon Musk insisting on his social media platform that these things are real, including the weird appearance of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris somehow showing up in England somewhere in the middle of all of these Union Jacks flying in patriotic pride. Seems like an unusual thing to do. And I thought, I guess somebody with a keener eye could tell whether that was supposed to be Marble Arch or something. But I mean, it shows the setting is clearly that of the Parisian Arc instead. Anyway, so it's AI slop. And speaking of AI slop, even before I said I was going to get away from the Charlie Kirk thing, but one of the phenomena observed over the weekend was probably about the most Russian thing I've seen in a while, too. I would say this is Russian work here. But lots of AI-generated Facebook posts claiming that various celebrities, musicians, athletes, what have you, were pausing their shows, games, whatever, taking place in a stadium setting for a moment of silence in memory of Charlie Kirk. But in many cases, famously left-leaning performers, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, as well as, more right-leaning country music stars but various sports stars, and all the same kind of story. And they brought the audience to tears. And here's what they said. And Tiger Woods pledged $5 million to build a statue of Charlie Kirk at Augusta National. And there's no way they're putting up anything at Augusta National. Not just because not because they don't like Charlie Kirk there, possibly, but because a statue, you're going to change the grounds at Augusta, famously impossible to do. But anyway, I mean, just AI slop, papering the entirety of Facebook with fake stories about everybody coming together over Charlie Kirk, which I guess is what opened the door for even his bitterest internecine enemies like Nick Fuentes, Jack Posobiec, and others to, sidle in the door and say, oh, yeah, great friend of mine, Charlie Kirk. And by the way, we should round up everybody who says anything negative about him and have them murdered in order to, put a cap on the murder cycle. Anyway, so other stories that I thought were important that we can make. I got time to shoehorn in one more. I'm going to make it the fallout from the raid at the Hyundai battery plant in Elabelle, Georgia, which when we left you last week sounded like that was, spinning out of control as well. They did finally bring home all of the Korean workers detained there. But as you might have suspected, now we're beginning to get Korean language newspapers and translations, which we hope are accurate translations, brought to us, at least in some cases, by reporters that we know and trust. Sarah Jeong, for one, who brings us this material from a Korean source and translated. But just let me open it up here and remind you, Sarah Jeong, editor at The Verge, and herself, I would guess, Korean American, and I guess that's how anybody can get access to hopefully a halfway decent translation. But what's going on in Korea? She says, I don't know if you've seen the South Korean editorial that ran a few days ago. Google Translate version scorched my eyebrows. So she may not have, I don't know whether she can check the validity of the translation, or she just simply used the Google Translate, and you never want to totally depend on that. But in case you were wondering whether Koreans were puzzled by all this, I mean, they're puzzled that it would happen at all in America, but they are seeing things very clearly, as it turns out. Let me just give you a couple. There's just a couple of screen grabs. This translation. MAGA, they're telling people there in Korea, is fundamentally a populist white racism. Yes. The slogan, Make America Great Again, is more accurately described as Make White America Greater. Interesting. The fact that the tariff policy insisted on a 50% tariff only on steel and aluminum stems from the concentration of these groups, that is MAGA supporters, in the Rust Belt. Yes. The massive crackdown on illegal immigrants at the Hyundai plant must be understood in this context. Scenes of our workers, Korean workers, being chained and escorted away were reminiscent of the dragging of American slaves in the 18th and 19th centuries. The Department of Homeland Security boasted of, quote, the largest single-site raid in history, and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement even brazenly released footage of the raid, which was highly, I'm going to say, violative. They say highly violating human rights, violative of human rights, true, as if to boast of their, quote, achievement. Far-right whites may have secretly rejoiced. Even politicians like the Georgia governor and local lawmakers who had been active in attracting factories have shifted their stance and sympathized with their grievances. I'm not so sure about that, but this is likely because it's difficult to ignore the anti-immigrant sentiment of Native Americans. Like the McCarthyism that swept through American society in the 1950s, irrational madness dominates American society. The recent visa issue, which could have been resolved diplomatically with advance notice from an ally, is difficult to explain beyond political maneuvering. The fact that they mobilized helicopters and armored vehicles for show, as if they'd been caught, or I guess as if they had caught criminals, is difficult to explain. Yes, it's difficult to explain, and it must be particularly difficult for the Korean public to swallow, given that up until recently, South Korea had their own brain-rotting, easily fooled by manipulated video and online conspiracy theory sorts of things, and they got rid of him. They took care of business, as Elvis might have said way back in the day when Elvis was alive and relevant, or, whatever. But they have confronted the same problem. A president disconnected from reality, driving policy based on gobbledygook in his own brain rot addled head, and they took him on and got rid of him. And they're amazed, I guess, to see the great bastion of democratic freedom, the shining city on a hill, the United States of America, unable to do the same. And not only unable to do the same, but taking on Korean nationals and Korean pride in the process. It was quite remarkable, to say the least, to be reminded of this and to see several other takes on what happened and the Korean reaction to it. Among other things, by the way, other Korean language translations, just some of the most horrific things that apparently now reports emerging that from the people who were taken, that not only were they shackled and marched off like criminals, but that the ICE agents and the people processing them on the way into their horrific captivity conditions were making like the racist, like pulling at a corner of their eyes, making slanty eyes at them and laughing at them while they marched them away at gunpoint. They're never going to forget
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
And so it should come as no surprise that there's no deal concluded on the supposed trade deal between Korea and the United States. And I guess they'll probably never close on that one either. But wow, we've got lots to cover for the rest of the week. We'll be revisiting all these topics and all the things we missed. But stay tuned for Justice Putnam to catch you up on some of them in the meantime, next.